In from today. As you all start to come in to the webinar here, feel free to put in the chat where you're logging in from. It's always interesting to see how many different countries and time zones and places that we represent during our webinars and our meetings. We're going to give people just a second or more to log in here yet, and then we will start our program. Recording.
Ready.
Dan's on here from Chicago. Well, good afternoon. Like I said, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are logging in from. Today, we have a great presentation. First, I just want to touch a little bit on LHSA. I want to thank all the members that are on this webinar and everybody who's brought a new member to the mix this year. As you know, we're going for 2021 members right here in 2021, and we hope we can make that goal. We're a membership-driven organization, and we're not for profit. So we not only focus on the history of Leica, but also photography and using our Leicas. And we have two major events every year that you can attend when the pandemic allows, and that's our spring shoot. This year, that'll be virtual, and it's coming up in May. So keep an eye out for that. And then in October and later in the year, we have our annual meeting, which is scheduled for Seattle. So keep a lookout for that. And if you are so inclined, because this is membership driven and the projects that we have going on are important to everyone, if you're so inclined to give, please text give to LHSA to 44321, and you can give any amount, and we would greatly appreciate that. There are several membership levels, and you can check that all out on our website. And when I bring up the great projects that we have going on, I want to touch on just a couple of them. We have a history of documents and a storage of archives that are being worked through and scanned and put into a system that we're all going to be able to access very soon, within months. And that is a great thing that several people have been working on. We have our Vice President, Brad Husick, who's on with us today. He's been working on the redo of the website and keeping all of our technology as modern as possible with respect to how we get information out to everyone. And of course, last year we pivoted to these webinars, which Brad was instrumental in getting going. So I want to thank everybody who serves on the board, everybody who has served on the board in the past and continues to do the work of LHSA. Today, we're going to talk about the making of the Viewfinder, and I'm going to turn this over to Bill Rosauer and Kristen Vignes very soon. I want to thank our special guests, in case I don't get a chance to come back on later, from Leica. We have Dr. Kaufman and Stefan Daniels here as well. And we have some guest photographers that are going to be incredibly interesting to listen to. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Bill Rosauer.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to put my screen up for Kirsten.
It's up.
Okay. All right. I can't see myself, but that's okay. Not going to worry about it. A lot of you may know me. A lot of you may not know me. Just to give you a little background on myself, I've been involved with Leica pretty much my whole life. I started thinking about it the other day. My dad started with getting his first Leica in Germany after the war. He was there with the occupation as an Army ordnance photographer. And at the time he was over there, at one point, he met Dr. Wolf, who many people know who that is. I worked my first job in a camera store that sold Leicas. And at the age of 17, I convinced my father that we needed to go to the Leica school in Wetzlar, which we did. I opened up my own photo store in 1983 and became a Leica dealer. And I also attended 2 Leica dealer academies in the 80s in Wetzlar. I joined the LHSA the same year I opened my store. I figured it'd be a good idea as a Leica dealer. I was the president from 1998 to 2000. And I became the editor in 2000 as well. And I've also worked with Stefan Daniels since about 1998. And we'll show a picture of that along with Tom Abramson, who was always with us. And we worked on the Black Paint M6 TTL, the Hammertone, the MP3 with the Summilux retro lens, and lately the 50 APO Classic. Okay, now that I've introduced myself, I want to talk a little bit about how I approach being the editor of LHS, of the Viewfinder. As you can understand through my past, I've developed a lot of connections with Leica and with Leica people and Leica photographers around the world. Way back when I first became the editor, we had a rule that we only would have contributions, in other words, articles, from members. And I used to have the usual gang of suspects, Jim Lager, Ed Schwarzreich, Tom Abramson, Dick Gilchrist, and I'm sure I'm leaving out other people that used to write for me in the past. And after Tom passed away, I decided that things were starting to get a little thin, and maybe I should reach out more to people and reach out to non-members. And through the internet, which makes reaching out to people or seeing what people are up to, I'm on the Leica Users Forum every day. I'm in numerous Leica groups on Facebook. And I look for people that are talented. I look for people that do good work with Leica and that seem to be interesting. Jonah was somebody that I reached out to because of the exposure to his reviews and seeing him on Leica Users Forum. Same thing with Milan. I first saw his work on the Tambar thread, and I think that thread is up to something like 80 pages on the Leica Users Forum. And I saw his work, and as everyone knows, the Tambar is a really tough lens to master, and Milan has mastered that lens. So I reached out to him. I said, would you like to write for Viewfinder? Would you like to talk about the Tambar? And he agreed. I did the same thing with Dr. Kaufman. I reached out to him. Hey, I've never had any recollection of any top people at Leica ever writing for Viewfinder. And I thought, you know what? Let's reach out to Dr. Kaufman, and he agreed to write for us. We help people who are not writers write. We help people who are not native English speakers with their articles. Ed and I do a lot of work with those authors, and we do rewrites. And Chats, who a lot of you know, I've been having him help me with some of these rewrites as well. Boy, what else can I say about that part of Viewfinder? Basically, I reach out to people. I collect articles from people coming in through my emails, coming in through my PO box. I mean, they come all sorts of different ways. And first I evaluate the articles, see if there's something that needs to be done time-wise for a certain reason. Obviously, we work very closely with Leica, and a lot of the articles that are related to new product, we have an idea when they're coming. We know when the embargo date is. I talked to Jono about, what his article is going to be about the upcoming product, and we work on that with him. Let's see. And then I'll talk to Kirsten along the way and let her know, boy, we're getting an article, about this. I've got an article from this person. Product launch is going to be happening. So, we talk about what's going to be in Viewfinder. And I'll make suggestions to her about what I think should be featured, what importance we put on things, priorities of articles, what articles we have in the can. And that's a good thing for an editor to have. But, as far as the various authors go, sometimes I get a little frustrated that things don't get put into Viewfinder right away. So I hope you all understand that we're not playing favorites with anybody, but there's various reasons for what we do. Let's see, what else do we do? Okay, well, that's pretty much what I have to say about Viewfinder. Kirsten, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. Bill, I know you gave me a couple slides beforehand. I know there were some photos you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, there's Tom. We used to go to all the meetings together, and it was a little tongue in cheek, hey, let's get a picture of you as the editor. The picture here on the right was Photokina 96, which was the intro of the R8, which was a very big deal for Leica at the time. And next to me is Sal DeMarco, who was a contributor. He was a Time Life photographer. Good friend, he's passed on. Tom, of course, in the front row. Roger Horn, who was the president of Leica USA up until very recently. And in the back, that's Ray Tomaselli, who was vice president and also the credit manager. So Ray and I had a very good relationship, let's say. And the next slide, that's when Stefan and I first started working together on the black paint M6. And Tom, of course, was in all those meetings. And back then you could smoke in the meeting rooms. And Tom would smoke his pipe constantly. Stefan can attest to that. And then here's another picture of me and my good friend Jim Lager, past president at LHSA, past Viewfinder editor. And now Jim accompanies me on my Wetzlar trips.
And he's a regular contributor to Viewfinder. We'll show you some of his articles.
Yeah. Yes.
And then
here's an article I wrote about Haus Friedwart. We did that in 2019 in May. I was very excited to get in, and first time I had ever been inside. And Knut Kuhnleitz was our guide, which Knut unfortunately passed away in the meantime. Wonderful, wonderful person. I met him many, many years ago on one of the Leica dealer trips. And Knut is the grandson of Ernst Leitz II. And an article I wrote about the Mont Blanc pics. And yeah, I can talk for a minute quickly about how I thought of this article. There was a book that came out about Oscar Barnack and the invention of the Leica. And in the first section, here's a handwritten letter to Oscar Barnack. And I'm like, what the hell's this letter about? It's in German, a little hard to read. And basically, it was about the Mont Blanc pics. And I had never heard of this. And of course, you start down the rabbit hole doing your research, and then I've got to write an article about this. And in the picture there, you can see Jono is on the right, and that's David Farkas in the middle, and Peter Karba. And he was making a point about lens design. And I handed him my Mont Blanc picks. And I thought it was very interesting that he's making a point with something that Oscar Barnack worked on a long, long time ago. And then here's another article I did, the Japanese Summilux, which is the Canon 51.4 lens. Took it to a Santana concert and got some great pictures with it. And I said, you know what, this will make a good article. So if any of you are getting ideas, this is the kind of stuff we look for. All sorts of subjects.
Okay, thank you, Bill. So Bill and I work really closely together. He's the editor, so basically he sources all the content. He reaches out to members, to photographers, to get the content together, and then he hands me that content, and I, as the graphic designer, take all those texts and images, and I put them together in an Adobe program called InDesign, and I lay it out and turn it into an actual magazine. But beforehand, like Bill was saying, we work very closely together on what's going to be on the cover, what can wait till the next issue, what needs to be in the center, number 26 page. So when you open it up, that's the first thing you see. So before this presentation, I took a deep dive into the Viewfinder Archives, which is an incredible resource available to all members. If you haven't already checked it out, I really recommend you doing it. There's actually every single Viewfinder article since the first in 1968 available for members to download and read. If you need a good gift for a Leica nut, just download a Viewfinder from the year they were born and print it out. Assuming it was after 1968, of course. So the first Viewfinder, at least what I can tell from the archives, if anybody on here was around during this era or knows more, feel free to drop it in the comments or butt in. So from what I can tell, the first Viewfinder was in 1968. It was a simple 2-page text-only newsletter, basically. And then throughout the late 60s, getting into the early 70s, we can see on this center issue here, a Viewfinder logo was established. We're starting to see more imagery. They're getting longer. And then in 1971, I thought this was interesting. You can see that to the left of the official Viewfinder logo at this point, it changes, the acronym changes from LCI, which was Leica Collectors International, to LHS, which was Leica Historical Society. Eventually, the official logo had the A for America. But I thought that was interesting. I learned a lot about Viewfinder these last few weeks putting this together. So then we keep going. In 1971, we see the Viewfinder logo gets a little bit more 1970s-ish. It's a very 70s typeface. They're getting longer. At this point, it's 20 to 30 pages per newsletter. And then in 1985, we see where Viewfinder really goes from a newsletter to an official magazine. Here we have a dedicated photographic cover. We can see the LHSA logo here. And this is kind of really where it transitions to a magazine rather than a newsletter. And then the one on the far right was actually my favorite discovery in the archives. This was the first full color cover, and it was also the year I was born. So 2 very important things happened for Viewfinder that year. So then we keep going. In 2001, we see the iconic rangefinder cover. This was around for probably about a decade. This is how I remember finding Viewfinder. This was the first issue that I saw, was with this iconic rangefinder border, which I actually really like. I think it was very clever. we can see the Viewfinder logo starting to look more like what it looks like today. And then also in those early 2000s, we see the first color images on the inside of the magazine. It wasn't 100% color, but there were select articles in color, and there were, member submitted images, pages with member submitted images in full color as well. And then in 2013, we see Viewfinder gets a full makeover. This is when we hired Eddie, and then we also went to a full bleed design, full color design on the inside. And I think Eddie's the one, he kind of paved the way for me. I started doing the design after him, but he really kind of paved the way, and I think brought Viewfinder into the 21st century in terms of layout. So he worked on Viewfinder for a couple of years, and then in 2015, I took over as designer. And while I kept his cover and his logo, I kind of modernized the inside a little bit. So I have a BFA in advertising photography from Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York, home of Kodak and the always 18% gray sky. While I was there, though, I also did a concentration in typography and book design. So for me, I really like to play around with the text. I think the typography is an important part of the layout. I don't just see it as a title. I see it as part of the article. So for me, laying out Viewfinder really allows me to combine, my two passions, which is photography, specifically Leica photography, as well as typography. It's definitely, it's a lot of work. Each issue takes me about 30 hours, and that's on top of my full-time job, which is at Leica Store Miami. I do all their design and marketing. But I don't really, it doesn't feel like work to me because I really love putting together Viewfinder because it's really kind of everything I love all in one, Leica photography, typography, and I have complete creative liberty, which is nice. Bill basically just hands me the content and I do whatever I want with it. And so far everybody's been pretty happy, and all the contributors so far have been pretty happy with how I've laid out their work. So going through the archives these last few weeks and seeing where Viewfinder started and how far it's come has really made me appreciate the decades of work that have gone into this magazine to make it what it is today, to go from, a 2-page newsletter to what is now an award-winning magazine. Last year in 2020, we won an award for design excellence from the Association of Media Publishing. And we have our dear executive director, Richard Rahino, to thank for that. He's the one who said, hey, Viewfinder's a really great publication for a nonprofit camera club. Like, we should enter it in this competition. And we took home a silver award. So that was pretty exciting. So Jim talked, or not Jim, sorry, Bill talked a little bit about the content and how he sources that content. So I just wanted to show a couple examples of the kinds of content that Viewfinder has. I think one of the things that really sets Viewfinder apart is its content and the diversity of that content and of the contributors. And we have Bill to thank for that. He's worked really hard on getting unique content and contributors, from people like Dr. Kaufman and Magnum photographers like Costa Manos, all the way to, new members that have never been published before. And that's what's really great, is that as a member, you have an opportunity to be part of this magazine and to be published alongside, award-winning photographers. So this first slide here, so these are a couple samples by Jim Lager. He's, maybe one of the longest running contributors to Viewfinder. Not sure, but since the first issue I've been laying out, there's always been a Lager article. We usually have 2 or 3 in each issue. They're kind of shorter, kind of obscure facts. They're really kind of fun. Shorter articles with these kind of obscure historical stuff about, you know, missing serial numbers and what happened to this camera. They're really fun little articles. We also have Dick Gilchrist. He also contributes kind of stuff about older equipment, kind of tips and techniques about using screw mount cameras today. We also have Ed Schwartzreich. We always have a few articles by him. We just finished up, I think it was a 3-part series. So we had 1 article and 3 consecutive issues about Dr. Paul Wolf and Trichler. I don't know if I'm saying that right. So then on the more visual side of things, we probably every other issue, we always have an article by one of our members, Dr. Albert Knapp, and his wife, Ruth. And I can always rely on them for the eye candy. So, you know, we have these historical articles, but we also like to balance them with something more visual, more, you know, samples of modern photography taken with modern Leicas. And you know, so I can always rely on them for the visuals. And what I really like about their stuff is a lot of times the text itself is very, it's a lot shorter and it's more poetic. So it gives me a lot of space and creative freedom to play along, you know, play around with the text, with the typography, and really use the typography to emphasize the photography. And then of course we have Jono Slack, who we're actually going to hear from in just a minute. So I won't say too much about him, but probably every issue or every other issue, he contributes a camera or lens review to Viewfinder. And we try to publish Viewfinder to line up with important Leica product announcements, and Bill touched on that. So right now we just, you know, Leica just announced the relaunch of the f1.2 Noctilux. So we're working on the current issue, and we have an article by Jono, an article by Milan, who we're also going to hear from later about that lens. So we try to be relevant and on point with each article, you know, with each issue of Viewfinder. And that's why, like Bill was saying, sometimes we can't always publish everything. We have a limited amount of space. We only have 52 pages per issue. So sometimes we have to push articles back, or sometimes we just can't fit everything in. So aside from our regular contributors, we also have guest contributors. And I kind of touched on this before. So this was an article we did with Konstantin Manos. And I actually saw in the archives, we did an article with him, I think back in the 80s. So that was kind of fun to see, like, something written 20, 30 years ago, and now we're seeing it again in Viewfinder, and how that's changed and how perspectives have changed. And it's kind of cool. So, you know, we have Magnum award-winning photographers like Konstantin Manos in Viewfinder, you know, but then we also have articles by members. This was by a member, Chats. I think Bill mentioned him earlier. I don't know if he's been published before or not, but, you know, this was just an article about his journey with Leica, about his Leica story. And these were really wonderful images to lay out as well. This was an article by Richard Regino, our executive director. I don't know that he's had his photography published either. I'm not sure, but he got a Leica CL and recently, and he took a trip to Spain, and it's really fun to lay out articles, you know, for people that aren't necessarily career photographers or award-winning photographers, but it's fun when you discover good work and new work, to work with that person and really make their photography come alive. And yeah, this was an article by one of our international members and one of our board members, William Fagan. And this was a really fun article. So this was more of a retrospective article he did. He had actually taken these photos about 10 years ago. And at the time that we published this a couple of years ago, this is when everything was happening in Aleppo. And so this was kind of about, you know, a memoir about his time when he was working in the Middle East, which I always think is fun. Sometimes you take photographs and you put them in a hard drive, or you do something with them, but then 10 years later, you know, they have a completely different meaning. And you look back on them and you just have completely different perspectives. So this was a really fun article to put together, and again, just an example of content. It doesn't have, you can submit, if you have an idea for an article, it doesn't have to be a photograph you took yesterday. It could be something like this where, you have photographs you took 10, 20 years ago, but they have a whole new meaning to you today. This was an article by Rosalind Tay, another international member from Singapore. And this is an example, I believe, Bill, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think she was a member, but he saw her work. He reached out to her, she became a member, and then we encouraged her to contribute to Viewfinder. And
Yeah, Rosalind is another one that I solicited. I saw her work, and it must have been on Facebook. And, I'm looking at these pictures and I'm like, oh my God, who is this person?
Yeah.
So she agreed to write for us, and I met her in person in Boston when we could still travel. She came to the meeting. She was so excited about LHSA.
Yeah. Yeah. And this, I loved her photographs. I think these are just some of the strongest images I think we've had in Viewfinder. So I'm really glad Bill found her, and she's a member now, and she's excited about LHSA, and it was an opportunity to get new content for Viewfinder. This was an article by our now president, Keith. I think when he wrote it, he wasn't president, but this was a fun article too about Chernobyl. And then, this is the article by Bill. We saw these earlier. We saw this one earlier. And this is an article by myself. This was about a trip I took to India, photographing with the CL, the digital one, not the analog. So Viewfinder really is an effort by the society. Bill and I aren't just a hired out editor or graphic designer. We're both Leica nuts. We photograph with the gear. I've been shooting with Leica for about a decade now. I know Bill's been longer than that, but we're really passionate about Leica. We use the equipment. And I think that really contributes to the quality of Viewfinder. If I was just a graphic designer that didn't really care about photography or Leica or cameras, I don't think it'd be as well put together as it is. So with that said, if you have an idea for an article, please email us. Part of the reason of this webinar is sort of to encourage, members and remind members that anybody can submit to be in Viewfinder. You don't have to be an accomplished photographer or have any sort of accolades. If you just want to share, your Leica journey or a travel log, if you've, been shooting with a camera and want to write a review about a camera or lens, or if you have a technical or historical article. We have a piece by Bill Royce. He a lot of times does Lightroom and Photoshop tips and techniques. I didn't have a sample of that one, I should have. But we usually have one of those in every other article or so, every other issue or so. So if you have an idea, please email us. Bill's email is lhsaeditor@yahoo.com. And yeah, just submit a first draft to Bill in PDF or Word format. And yeah, if we can fit you in and it's relevant, we absolutely will. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to email me. I'll put my email in the chat, or email Bill as well. And yeah, I think with that, we should probably turn it over to our guest speakers. And we put together an official submissions guideline, a PDF. So I'm gonna drop that in the chat as well, a link to that PDF as well.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, Bill. I think we're gonna go to, is Jonah gonna speak first?
I think so.
All right, it's over to you.
Hi there.
Other side of the pond.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks, Keith, for the introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here. As far as I can figure out, I started to write for Viewfinder in 2015, which is the same year that Kirsten brought her fantastic design skills to the magazine. Maybe we have the first slide, Kirsten? I think the first article I wrote was about using M lenses on the Leica T. This was in April 2015. I can remember my huge excitement getting the cover image on the next issue with a picture from my article on the M monochrome. But my relationship with Leica goes back to 2008. I first began testing firmware shortly after the M8 was released. I'd previously been working with Kodak, examining color casts on the Kodak SLRN, which was definitely relevant experience back then. About 18 months later, in the summer of 2009, I wrote a speculative email to Stefan Daniel, wondering if there'd be an opportunity to test the successor to the M8, which of course I didn't even know existed. About 10 minutes later, to my astonishment, my phone rang, and it was Stefan offering me the option to test the M9. A couple of weeks later, I took a detour to the UPS office in Launceston to pick up the test camera. This was en route from Cornwall to Heathrow to fly to Azerbaijan. And so the adventure began. Camera testing. Almost all magazines and internet reviewers develop a methodology for testing. Generally speaking, with the same scenes each time so that they can have comparative results for different cameras and lenses. Could we have the next slide, Kirsten? Is that possible? Thank you. This makes a lot of sense if your intention is to produce a review, but my job is to find out the unexpected problems in equipment and report back to Leica. The articles have always been byproducts of this process. So rather than going through a series of tests, I use the equipment as thoroughly as I can in as many different situations as possible and with as many different settings as possible. The important point is to keep your eyes wide open and to see if anything strange happens, however unlikely it might seem, or if there's anything odd about the image quality. And can we have the next slide, Kirsten? Thanks. For example, one evening just after New Year, I was testing the original Q on a chilly day on the Suffolk coast. There was a lovely detailed evening sky. I took a number of shots with a variety of apertures and shutter speeds. When I came home and looked, I found that the images at f5.6 were really soft off axis, much softer than they should have been. The center, however, was quite sharp, but with shots taken at other apertures, right up to f1.7, the images were sharp pretty much right out to the corners. It turned out to require a hardware adjustment to fix the issue, something quite cheap to do at the prototype stage, but embarrassing and very expensive after the launch of the camera. Of course, this is the holy grail for the camera tester, to find something in time to get it fixed before serial production begins. Can we have the next slide, Kirsten? Thanks. Communication is another important aspect of testing. As you can imagine, during the late development stages, everyone at Wetzlar is extremely busy, and a vague indication of a problem isn't very helpful and can easily get ignored. So having discovered a problem, it's really important to define it carefully. First of all, try to repeat it reliably, and then to write it up carefully and send examples and a clear description of the problem. Afterwards, for important issues, I always follow it up to make sure it's been addressed or at least noticed. And the next slide. Up until the last difficult year, cameras and lenses always seem to have turned up when we're off on a trip. This is the best way to get to know a camera or a lens properly, to use it intensively over a short period of time. That first trip to Azerbaijan with the M9 prototype sowed the germ of the idea for the articles, to think of a theme and then write a piece about the camera within that context, so that people get a feeling for the equipment rather than looking at the same test images that they saw for the last camera. Mind you, it isn't always perfect. My wife was not overjoyed when I told her that I was testing a black and white camera for our first trip to China back in 2012. And the next slide, please. So, Viewfinder magazine. I published the articles on my own website on the day of publication at the end of the embargo period. But although they may be linked on the LHSA websites, these bear little visual resemblance to the finished articles in Viewfinder. Quite often, I'll also add to the text, and the Viewfinder article is indeed the finished article. My process is to package the article up into a Word document. I don't include inline images because Kirsten does such a wonderful job with the layouts and picture placement. I wouldn't like to cramp her style. I simply provide her with a WeTransfer file full of full resolution images, enough to choose a selection and to leave some out as well. The most exciting thing is to get a PDF draft of the whole magazine with my article to proofread. The layout and the picture selection is always a pleasant surprise, and sometimes, just sometimes, it's an extra thrill to get the front page. It's also a treat to get a sneak preview of the other contributors' articles. There's so much of interest to read, and all the articles are imaginatively and beautifully presented. The print version usually appears on my UK doorstep a couple of months later. In fact, it's long enough to be exciting all over again. Could we have the next one, please, Kirsten? Okay. This article was branching out a little from my normal camera and lens articles. Nigel Fogg and B. Berman have been making camera bags since the late 80s, when they arrived in London to escape from apartheid South Africa. Bill Razar and I had both been buying bags for them, and so have lots of other people, for many years, and Bill had sold their bags in his camera store back in the day. I'm not sure where the idea of doing an article came from, but Bill was most enthusiastic, and on approaching Nigel and B, I was deluged with information and pictures, much too much to use, in fact. The Viewfinder magazine article emanated from this information, and Kirsten once again did a marvellous job with the design and layout. Most of the text is in their own words, and in line with the wonderful emails they send, B. Berman's voice is always in red and Nigel Fogg's in blue. Over the last year, I've been testing the Noctilux f1.2, and my most recent article for Viewfinder is for this, the third Leica historical lens after the Thambal and the 28 Summeron. It was announced at the end of January. I've sent in the text and the pictures for the next issue of Viewfinder, but I've yet to see what the article will look like. First of all, a bit of historical background. In 1966, Leica was still a big player in the photojournalism world, and there was an increasing demand for fast lenses for shooting in very low light. Nikon, Minolta, Canon, and Leica all produced f1.2 standard lenses in the 1950s and the 1960s. Leica's f50 f1.2 was the star of the show at the 1966 Photokina. Work started in Wetzlar in 1957 on the production of aspherical elements. The first lens prototype, produced in 1958, was the Summeron 35 f2.8 aspherical. This featured two aspherical surfaces, but never went into production. A 52mm f1 aspherical prototype, also featuring two aspherical elements, was produced in 1959, but Leica realized the image quality wasn't good enough at f1 and settled for the f1.2. The first prototypes were made in April of 1964, designed by Helmut Marx and Paul Sindel. Helmut Marx was Professor Max Berek's successor as head of the photographic lens design in Wetzlar and creator of the first Summicron 50 in 1953. The Noctilux 50 f1.2 has two aspherical elements, front and rear, which were made on a specially built grinding machine that had to be operated manually. There was only one machine and only one person capable of operating it, and Gerd Bergman had to discard many elements during the process. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced his name, but probably he's not around to criticize me. The Noctilux was released as the 11820 in 1966. Only 1,757 pieces were made, and the story is that they vary very much in sample quality. Could I have the next slide, please, Kirsten? The modern version has different glass and coatings, but apart from the fact that these days the aspherical elements don't have to be ground by hand, the design is otherwise faithful to the original. One assumes that sample variation in the new lens is quite minimal in comparison. There is a limited edition of 100 chrome finish lenses made of brass, and as I understand it, these have already sold out. The black version is in serial production and will be available for the foreseeable future, but you may have to wait a bit for one. Like some other fast lenses from the 1950s and 60s, I feel very much that this is two lenses rolled into one. And I chose the last two images to give an idea of the difference in the feel. The image on the left was shot at f1.2 and shows all the dreamy bouquet that the Noctilux is capable of. The image on the right was shot at f8 and shows the crisp acuity of the lens when stopped down. Actually, it's pretty sharp even by f2.8. Okay, that's it. The increasingly close relationship between Leica and the LHSA is a real advantage for both parties. Viewfinder magazine is a real jewel in the crown of the LHSA, and it's wonderful that it still exists as a print version, while so many publications are becoming web only. So congratulations to Viewfinder, and especially to Bill and Kirsten. Thank you.
Jono, thank you so much. Very much appreciated. And now we'll turn it over to Milam.
So hello, good evening from my side. I'm here in Belgium. I'm a fine art photographer specialized in what I call vintage models, so mostly like 30s, 40s and 50s. And I've been working with Leica more than, from the beginning of the M8, and ever since it's my only equipment. So and I've been using, because we're not talking about the new Noctilux, I've been using the old one as well. So I've been very fortunate even to use it in the field, although I was sometimes scared because, as you know, the old Noctilux 1.2 is mostly kept in cabins and stored in dry boxes. But I was one of the few people who really love to use it in the field. So for the next slide, a lot of people, I think they know me as the Tambar guy, because that's how a lot of people started to notice my work in the Leica world. Yeah, maybe we can turn over to the next slide, please, Kirsten. Yeah. So yeah, I did, as Bill introduced me, and I'm so happy to see everybody. That's maybe one of the most important things about these events, like the Leica, what I call the Leica family. It's such a small world. Everybody knows each other. I've been in very good contact these days with Bill, with Jono, with chats, with all the people. So I'm very happy that we can see each other now. It's not like in person, but it's virtual, and I hope we can see each other soon in Wetzlar. So yeah, Bill asked me for the Tambar, and I get, still to today, I get a lot of questions about the Tambar. I have a Facebook group about the Tambar, and yeah, people, it's a lens that you love or hate, and it's always a lens that will stay with my work, because I love to use it. It gives something very special rendering, and I love it to use it in the 1930s kind of way, especially in black and white. So this is what I did for Viewfinder. And yeah, I think that these classical lenses, although I have a lot of the new lenses as well, I love the classical Leica lenses, and that's why I was so happy that that Leica announced the new 50 Noctilux 1.2. So everybody could keep the old one in the safe and started to use the new one, that we could see more photos taken with the 1.2. So yeah, and then maybe the next slide. So besides working with the M system, which is my, like in French they say, my coup de cœur, it's my beloved camera to work with, I also use the S system. So I had the opportunity, thanks to Stefan Daniel and the good people at Leica, to beta test also the S3. I've been a big fan of the S system from the S2. I know also the people from Leica Store Miami are a really big fan of the S system. and it's a wonderful tool which I use most for my photo shoots when it's about professional work. So the S3 is of course an amazing camera, and yeah, it's a system that's mostly overlooked, but yeah, I love it. I cannot keep it out of my inventory. So every time when I need to do something serious, I take the S system. So and then I would like to show you maybe next slide some of the photos that I did for the release of the new Noctilux. So I've been comparing the old one with the new one, and besides, as Bill said in the beginning, and John as well, the coatings are a little bit different. There's a little bit more contrast. There's a slight different white balance if you open them, the photos together, but this is easily changed in post. So the old one was more for black and white, I feel, and the new one is more, the colors are more controlled. Certainly on the M10R, which I was testing, yeah, the M10R is a fantastic camera. So the new Noctilux goes very well on it. So people think always that you should use the most sharp lenses on it, which is of course fantastic, but also the older lenses work very well on the M10R. So here I did, I'm not so technical as Chono in explaining how lenses work and how they are in the review. So I tend to more to use each lens in a certain idea that I have to do it in a certain way that I feel like it suits the lens or it suits the style. So for the 51.2, I was looking for a little bit like a 60s style. So I was thinking about Mad Men. I was thinking about, you know, old cars from the 60s, the Mercedes Pagode. So I tried always to find location, setting, and I tried to prep it all very well. And always I'm looking for faces which really go good with this kind of photography. So both the male is a little bit like Don Draper from Mad Men, and the lady is somebody who also suits and understood what I would like to show with the new Noctilux. So these are the images that I took all with natural light. So often I like to use light as well, but with this Noctilux, you want, of course, to show the rendering of the lens wide open or a little bit stopped down. So yeah, here you have some. So here's the Mercedes Pagode from 1965, I think. So a wonderful car, goes well together with the lens, with the model. It was a rainy afternoon, but we still managed to do some things, and the model really, she was okay to be almost without coat. So here you can see really the rendering, the classical rendering of the 1.2, which is totally different than the other Noctiluxes. I'm a big fan of the Noctiluxes, so I have most of them to compare. And the 1.2, I really love it because of the size. It's not too big, it's wonderful. And yeah, the rendering is so soft, but still sharp in a way. And I really love the skin colors and the tones are so wonderful that you cannot compare with any other lens. So I'm a big fan of this lens, and I even prefer it over the new 095, which I also have. So for me, this is one I really keep in my collection and use it every time. So yeah, the 1.2 is a lens that I often sometimes take also as a, I'm probably before the release of the new one, I'm the only idiot who took it out for a photo shoot for a whole day, and it could get damaged or scratched, but yeah, the images from it, I really like it. So I'm very pleased that Leica also selected these photos for the launch. Yeah, maybe we can see a few more photos. Yeah, so here also, yeah, the rendering is something that you cannot compare with any other lens. It's for me a little bit like the 50 Simulux 1.4, the first version. So I'm crazy about 50 millimeters. So I have a lot of 50s in my collection. so I can compare them as well. So I like the extremes, like a 51.2 together with the 50 Apo, just like, you know, you have two different lenses which you cannot compare at all. And yeah, what we did here is something that I really enjoy to prepare a shoot, to see what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And this was all done on site, it took a few hours for it. So yeah, I'm really happy that I could do this. And I think that, yeah, the 1.2 will be forever a legendary lens. So I'm happy that I could speak about this and share my photos with you all. Yeah, I'm also very active on the Leica forum and on special groups on Facebook. So whenever you can see some photos which were not selected by Leica, but which were also done with this lens. So I'm very happy that LHSA and Bill, thanks to you that you invited me for this session, and I hope that we can all have a beer together in Wetzlar soon. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for presenting fantastic information, particularly on that new Noctilux. Well, Bill Rosauer has arranged for us some direct from Germany information today. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Stefan Daniel with Leica and with LHSA. I'll say both. And then Stefan, you can lead into Dr. Kaufman. So thank you very much. And Bill, did you have anything to add before we started? Bill's on mute.
Okay, now I'm unmuted, I hope. Wanted to thank Jono and Milan for agreeing to participate. Milan, I have not met in person. Jono, of course, I have. And they are very good friends of mine and good friends of LHSA. Now we have another good friend of mine, Stefan Daniel. Stefan, you're there somewhere?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm really happy to be part of this family gathering, I would call it. Yeah, I have no presentation like the others, but I'm here and happy to chat and yeah, be around.
Yes, Stefan, you and I go back a long ways. As you saw, the embarrassing picture of yourself as a young.
This was when I wore young man's shoes. Yeah.
Yeah, as a child. Boy, you know, I used to see you every Photokina, every PMA. And then you started coming over to the LHSA meetings. Yes. And I know that you've been tremendously well received by everyone. Everyone, you know, loves to hear from you. And you're always the highlight of any meeting that you attend with us.
Yeah, that's too much honor because for me, it's and I tell this also, I think all the time. Of course, it has something to do with work, but it also has something to do with being with friends and being with the Leica family, and that in the end is not really like work. So from that perspective. It's also always a great enjoyment, and I remember all the annual meetings in the different places in the US or even in Canada, and it's always a good memory I have.
Stefan, you know, perhaps you can talk a little bit about your time at Leica and when you started as an apprentice. A lot of people may not know that.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, the hardcore people may know it and get bored if I tell it again and again. But if you like me to do so, yes, please. So I was, I had an aunt. Actually, it's my I don't know how you call it, but she's my cousin, but she became a godfather, a godmother, yeah. And she was into photography, and I really enjoyed a lot what she was doing, because she was doing so-called diaporama slideshows with 2 projectors, dissolve unit. These diaporama were telling little stories, not longer than 3 to 4 minutes. And she was using a Leica because, yeah, as my cousin, she was living in the area. Her father, my uncle, was also working at Lights. So yeah, everybody was in that area. So this actually was a day when I was first touching a Leica. And this was a Leica Flex SL2. I still remember, because the virus caught me right away by touching this camera, looking through the finder, firing the shutter. It was amazing. Yeah, I was like maybe 13 years old or 12 or something. I don't remember. But since then, I developed a passion for photography, and at the same time, I developed a passion for this optical mechanical instrument, yeah, called Leica. And then it was pretty much obvious that I would like to start to work for this amazing company. So I did write a letter submitting for an apprenticeship at Leica, and fortunately, I really had the chance to be taken, because in this year, this was 1984, there were about 1,000 young people, writing applications, but 80 were taken in the different professions, yeah, like precision mechanics, electronics, optics, commercial things, and so on. So I was one of the lucky 80s to be taken. So I started my apprenticeship in '84, and there was a nice happening before Photokina '84, because the boss of the apprenticeship department showed us the M6 to be launched at Photokina before actually Photokina, to the young boys and girls age 16 or 17 or something. And we were like, oh, okay, this is the new M6 being launched at Photokina. So we felt super proud and privileged to see this marvel, which in the end remained in production for more than 18 years before it was launched. So this is a small story of my very early days at Lights, so to say.
And then you went to work for the set slide directors.
That is maybe something not many people know, because the Pradovitz story and the slide projectors and so on is well known. But it happened that Leica took over another German slide projector manufacturer up in Braunschweig, which is close to Hanover, in the northern part of Germany, in the Niedersachsen. This was a former operation of Zeiss Econ, yeah. And so this company was taken over to enlarge the range of slide projectors in those days. It was the beginning of the 90s when that happened. And so this was actually my first job as a product manager in Leica at this factory in Braunschweig. So I stayed there for 1.5 years. Also another experience, because it was a different company. And so, yeah, I really kind of enlarged my experience by having this special experience. 96 in Braunschweig. This was not long ago from when the Iron Curtain was raised. So people in Braunschweig were a bit stiff, and this was not my kind of lifestyle. So I really begged to my boss these days to go back to zones. So unfortunately, he accepted. So I became the product manager of the M system later on.
Yeah, that's when I first met you, when I was introduced to you as the manager of ZET. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And then I was working with Sunka Peters, who was the product manager for M before you. And then he left, and we were working on the black paint camera at that time. And then I met Stefan, and like I said, we used to meet with Tom all the time too. And it took 4 years to make that camera happen. And the people at Leica said, why do you want a black paint camera? The black chrome is superior.
Yeah, that's the typical German engineering perspective, to always strive for the best. But I think since then we learned a lot, that perfection has also different perspectives. Yeah, for some people it's more perfect if it wears out, and for some it couldn't be staying new enough over decades.
Perfection has different perspectives. That's a great little note, great little nugget for everybody. Bill, Stefan, why don't we bring in Dr. Kaufman as well in consideration of time here? I know we're getting up against the end, and Dr. Kaufman, say hi to you and see what you have to say to all of us Leica fans out here.
So I'm here sitting at my private office in Salzburg. So this is Austria, adds to the whole range of participants. One thing, I always do a sketch like this. You might see this. I call this the lying eight, or the eight who lies on the floor, because that's what we try to do at Leica. So the question was the vintage lenses. But we always have to balance between vintage and very new, ahead of technology. So we at Leica always need to do this. We have these, the roots somewhere. This is the history. And on the other hand, you would see this, let's say, the destiny of Rollei, yeah, which was also a great German brand, by the way, also at Braunschweig, yeah. Franke and Heidecke, Rollei is gone. So it's only the history left. Yeah. So in our case, this huge tradition and the huge sketchbooks of Oskar Barnack, etc. And on the other hand, we always have to go ahead, because then we have the right, let's say, the right mixture. So from my point of view, I don't have slides. What you see here, the article I had at Viewfinder, Bill sort of talked me into it. My story of photography. The funny thing, I have on my M10P, this is the only thing I have since 1966, German Drahtauslöser, which still works. Yeah, so I came as a young boy to photography, 12 or so, but we were not spoiled, so no Leica at all. My first Leica, you can see this in the article, was 2004 in February, so it did take a time. So, in our position at Leica, the next 12 to 24 months are very, very, I would say, interesting months for us and the industry, because the whole industry is at the crossroads. And we think what we're trying to do, and you will hear more during the year. At the moment, we can't talk about it, that there are steps in development which will hopefully secure our position between tradition and future. Coming back to what a lot of people say, oh, we should get together. We will offer you something for October, because as we all know, Photokina won't be, Photokina, it's gone. It's now replaced by more regional events, which are totally different. We will have, end of October, a huge invitation to Lights Park for the Oscar Barnack Award and a few other things, probably three days. Hopefully, we also have one project ready, which is in the development. We will present the tallest and biggest camera in the world at Lights Park, about 3 meters high, where you can go with your smartphone, and you get a QR code. And when you scan the QR code, you give some information via Bluetooth, and then you can, with your smartphone, shoot a picture, which is then a selfie with this huge camera, where the camera system is a standard camera system, but the whole setup is 3 meters to 2 meters, will be looking a little bit like the S3. And then you shoot a selfie, and then it's sent to your smartphone. And then you can post it and say to the world, hello world, I shot a selfie with the hugest, biggest, tallest, whatever camera in the world. So hopefully ready also in October. And there will be other events around this. There will be the final presentation of the watches 3 years later than we originally presented it, and so when we can travel again, and I heard this from quite a few people, hopefully after summer. So in October, there will be a huge event which we try to celebrate at Lights Park, and I hope to see everyone there. And also another additional element from my side, I negotiated since 2004 with Leica Microsystems of getting the Lights brand back, Ernst Leitz Wetzlar. I was able to buy this with one of my companies in 2018. So the Lights brand will be soon also together with Leica in a sort of way again, and you will hear more of it, especially in June. In June, end of June, we will have a huge event. We can't talk about the content yet, where you also will hear more from this kind of the older brand or the overall brand, Ernst Leitz Wetzlar. That's it from my point of view. I hope that, as everybody says here, that we can travel soon, that we can see each other soon, and we're looking ahead to a very interesting steps for the future of Leica.
Dr. Kaufman, that's great to hear, and we are so happy to have you speak to our members and to hear what's going on in Wetzlar, and to know that once we all start traveling again, we're all meeting in Wetzlar, so we'll see you there for sure.
And as you know, Bill, I always said this, you know, LHSA, yeah, there were some times when at the headquarters it was not very clear, the relationship. For me and for people like Stefan Daniel and others, LHSA is a core point of relationships together, and we will always try to do certain things and have things that LHSA is this kind of society of friends which we need.
That's fantastic. It's a great community, and everyone seems to really enjoy the community and the fraternity as much as the photography. So it is a rare thing indeed. So with that, I think we are at our time. I'm going to go ahead and see if there are any questions in the chat. If you have anything, go ahead and drop a question there in the chat real quick, and we'll try to send them the right way. But thank you, Bill and Kirsten, for talking to us about how Viewfinder works. Make sure everybody who wants to take a look at that document that kind of outlines your submission do that for sure. And then Jono and Milan, I'm not sure if he's still on, but yeah, you are. Thank you so much for talking about your photography, your work with the equipment, and all of that information that lets us know on day one how great these products really are. And of course, Stefan and Dr. Kaufman, thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Richard, for making sure that all of this Zoom stuff works well. And as Brad just pointed out in the chat, join us for all of the Leica LHSA webinars. We have a great list of things coming up. We of course pivoted to do this last year, and we've gotten great attendance for these, and we really appreciate that, and we appreciate all our members. So if there's nothing else, we'll wrap up today, and thank you very much for coming.
Keith, I did see a couple questions in the chat, and I don't know if somebody, I'm just
Sure.
scrolling through real quick. Somebody asked how many characters should a photo story have for the guest contribution? And I would say that it's really, it varies. It could be anywhere from 500 to 1500 kind of on average. You know, I showed Dr. Knapp's, which were obviously shorter, more poetic stuff. If there is something longer, sometimes we break it up into multiple issues. So it's really open for interpretation. There's really no set character limit there.
All right.
And then somebody also asked how many images to submit, and the more the better. It gives Bill and I more to work with. When you're laying something out and you have to think about which image goes next to which, it's just better to have more options. So, you know, don't send us like 200, but usually a final story has between 8 to 12 images. So if you send us 20 to 30, that usually gives us enough to work with.
Fantastic. And Bill, I should
Keith.
kick it back to you one more time, Bill, and see if you have anything to add. Thank you for arranging this webinar today and leading the charge on this.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Jono and Milan again. Wanted to thank Stefan Daniel for responding so quickly, and Andreas almost instantaneously. When I asked you to participate, you were right there saying, yes, you'll be there for us. And I appreciate that. And we'll be talking more about this thing in October. That's what I was thinking of, bringing my group back again. So we're very, very excited. Very excited.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Wiedersehen.